Well, that's that time again. It's the Alabama Auburn Show. I'm Jeff Underwood. J-Dub White. What's up, buddy?
Man, nobody cares about Jerry White, Jeff Underwood. They want the voice of the Alabama Crimson Tide, Mr. Chris Stewart. Welcome.
Gentlemen, how are you?
Doing great, buddy. How are you? Thank you for
Good.
joining us on the road. Everybody wants to
Yeah,
see your
glad to.
beautiful mug, but you're driving.
I'm trying to be a little safe. I just left Bryant Denny Stadium. We had an event with sponsor for Crimson Tide Sports Network um, and tour for some of those folks, and I apologize for being a few minutes late. Had to hustle through with that, and again, from a safety standpoint, and as a favor to America, I'm not available on video. So.
Right.
So anyway, I appreciate you guys understanding.
Hey, but before we get in this, Chris, how did your son do in the golf tournament?
Oh man, they're playing yesterday in this thing called PGA Junior League, and he's part of the junior program at Bentbrook, a public course in the western area of Jefferson County, and he and his teammates did pretty well. They finished just out of the playoff for the
Oh,
championship. They finished fourth. The top two teams made it from different clubs around this section, the PGA section, and I was proud of him. He did well, had a good time, and he stays busy. I've gone from being proud to being ticked off because he's gone from getting better and improving to now he's better than I am, and that's as a father, I'm incredibly proud. As a competitor, it ticks me off.
well, that's a pretty tough course too. We played there in several of the old Buffalo Rock tournaments over the years. It's not
Yeah,
an easy place to
Jimmy
play.
Jimmy Lee's Jimmy Lee's place is great, and he's been fantastic to me and my family, and the opportunity that we get. That's our home course. I literally live right on the golf course or right off of the practice facility there and instructional facility, and it's a wonderful place. We're really fortunate to have it in the area, and uh, it's been an awful lot of fun.
Well, you've been again. You've been with Alabama for the University there for man a long time. You're not new to the Roll Tide game for sure. Um, you got any favorite moments that stand out, non-football related to this
Whew.
point? Any basketball, any baseball, anything other than football that stands out to you over your career?
Yeah, let me tell you, man, that's a tough one because when you did baseball for on radio alone, I did 24 seasons before I
Yeah.
hung it up
Hey.
last year. Worked with David Crane my first 8 years, and then uh, had the lead role the last 16, and really really enjoyed it. Worked with some great people and coaches and players. Just really really fortunate. The one I always talk about in baseball was I guess it would have been 2010 when uh, Nathan Kilcrease, I say it slightly in jest, threw about 1,000 innings over the course of a weekend in the regional in Atlanta against Georgia Tech, and uh, sometimes in our business you just get lucky and you start saying something, and then the next thing you see plays out just perfectly. And I had one of those moments. Nathan Kilcrease's nickname was Peanut, and it was the most perfect nickname because that's about his size. They listed him. They listed him at about 5'6", which I love because that allows me to list myself at 6 feet. And so, and I'm not, and he wasn't either. But anyway, little bitty guy who was just had a heart the size of the entire state, and the catcher Brock Bennett wasn't much bigger. And Kilcrease gets the final out on a fly out to left field, and I don't remember what all I said, but at one point I I was describing the dog pile as they were all converging on one spot, and just as I'm getting that out of my mouth, Kilcrease gets knocked down, and he's at the bottom of the pile, and I said, "There's a dog pile on the mound, and a little bitty peanut is at the bottom," and it timed out just right. I got lucky on that, but the moment was very big because that was a excuse me, that was a Georgia Tech team that I think was the number 5 national seed. It was Mitch Gaspard's first team at Alabama. And I said 10, it may have been 2008. I can't remember, but they were, it was a great win, a great moment, and one that I was fortunate to get to call. But another, I guess, basketball, the Final Four, obviously,
Yeah.
incredible. The win over North Carolina that put us in the game with Clemson, and then the win over Clemson to get us to the Final Four, special. But when you're talking regular season games, I think it still probably goes back to, with a bunch of them in there, Trevor Relaford's 3-quarter court shot to beat Georgia in the final game of the regular season. That not only did it salvage hope, even though we didn't make the NCAA tournament, it kept us alive for it at that moment, because you knew if you lost, you had no chance shy of running the table in Atlanta at the SEC tourney and getting that automatic bid. But the sidebar to that is the fact that that was the end of a year-long celebration of 100 years of Alabama basketball. And that season culminated with the invitation to all living former players, coaches, managers, trainers, anybody that was tied to the basketball program that was still with us over the last 100 years was invited back. And we had a ton of people there, and including C.M. Newton and Wimp Sanderson, and just so many former players. And after the game, there was going to be a big reception and program up in the club level, and I was going to be the MC for this event. Well, we had a 20-point first half lead. In fact, early in the second half, I think we had a 20-point lead. And suddenly it's a tie game. There's about 8 seconds to go, and Georgia's got a timeout and an inbounds play with a chance to beat us in regulation. And instead of being the MC for a celebration, I was going to have to preach a funeral, because that's what it would have been like to try to do something post-game after that. And amazingly, Nick Jacobs got in the way of Charles Mann, who lost the handle on the ball. It was picked up by Coop, who then flipped it to Trevor Relaford, who had the presence of mind to look at the clock, take 2 dribbles, I believe, maybe a third, and then let it fly from just beyond the top of the key, shooting to the other end of the floor. And he didn't throw it. If you remember it, it was the most beautiful shot, because he let it fly in motion in the beautiful spin and rotation, and the whole place basically goes quiet and time stood still until that thing goes through the net right after the horn had blown. And it sounded like an absolute explosion in that Coliseum. And as everybody else did, I also lost my mind. And it was just a special moment, special opportunity. And on top of it, the really selfish part of it was like, hallelujah, I don't have to preach a funeral today. So it was really, really fun. Those are 2 that stand out. I get asked that question a lot, and it's amazing to me how I'll often have a different answer. I'm not going to say every time, but I normally go with whichever one pops in my head first. And there are some different ones. Colin Sexton's win in the SEC tournament over Texas A&M, his coast-to-coast play. Ronald Steele had a game winner to beat Georgia. There are a bunch in 22 seasons of doing basketball, and a lot of moments in 24 years of baseball as well. But those are among those that have always stood out to me for one reason or another.
Well, you got Coach Oates. He's not satisfied, right? So he's brought in it's a big hire. of Brian Adams from Detroit
Yeah,
Pistons. Talk about that hire just a little bit about the
man.
importance of bringing him on.
I'll be honest. I don't know a lot about Coach Adams. I glanced at the resume briefly, um, but I think it also signals just how much of an influence the NBA game is on what Alabama does and how Nate Oates is influencing what's done at college and how difficult it is. He's got great players, and he'll be the first to tell you that helps, and that's where it starts. But man, he's got such a great system on the offensive end that puts pressure on the opposing team, and yet defensively, they are really learning how to ramp things up as well. Um, it's fun to see, and I think Coach Adams will just bring another element of that as well. You got a phenomenal recruiter in Preston Murphy that it's not exclusively him, but he's the primary recruiter, and he's been phenomenal. I think in the offseason or last recruiting cycle, he was 6 for 6 on guys that we were going after. And make no mistake, Nate Oates is a great recruiter as well, but Preston Murphy on the front lines of it is just fantastic. And Ryan Pannone, wonderful at breaking down film. And you talk about a guy who's a film junkie.
Yes.
That's him, and I think Coach Adams, will probably pair very, very well together and make sure that we're as prepared from a film study standpoint as anybody you'll find anywhere.
Hey, Coach. I always got to call you Coach, man, because you've seen more film than most coaches, to be honest. But hey, I have a question here from Daniel Harper, loyal Alabama fan. He wants to know, how has the energy in Coleman changed under Coach Oates compared to previous staffs?
Well, I think the biggest part is just winning, and the pace of
It don't
play.
hurt.
No,
Right.
it starts with winning, but the pace and the tempo. It's a fun, entertaining style, and there's nothing more fun than winning. So even if you're going at a slower pace, it would be entertaining because the bottom line is getting the win. But at the same time, when you put an exciting brand and style of play together with winning at a place where, look, everybody knows that Alabama football is, was, and forevermore shall be king on the Alabama campus when it comes to athletics. We know that, and there is nothing wrong with that. And that's part of why Nate Oates has been so successful, is that rather than trying to, I'm not even going to say fight that, because I've never seen anybody that's tried to fight it in that role. But rather than maybe seeing that as a negative, it's an absolute positive for him, because he knows what that means on a recruiting weekend when he brings kids in and they go to a football stadium with 100,000. But the reality is, football is what it's always going to be. But man, I've never seen the interest in the conversation about basketball at the level it is right now. So he's embraced what football is and how it helps and how it leads the charge and that's where the line, why we got to be a football school or a basketball school, why can't we just be a championship school? And that's what the University of Alabama is. And basketball is where he wants to win. He wants to do what hasn't been done at the University of Alabama in men's basketball. And the only thing that hasn't been done there, or hadn't been done, I should say, was getting to a Final Four. That's been checked off the list. And then winning a national championship. And you guys probably are aware of this, but not everybody is. Everybody's second fiddle to Kentucky historically in the SEC.
Mhm.
Everybody. They're just like Alabama basketball. That's the biggest, I won't say hurdle, but in terms of perception, Alabama men's basketball is on the same campus as Alabama football and in the same league as Kentucky basketball.
Mm.
So you're never going to supplant those two historically, and that's fine. But in terms of all-time SEC wins, nobody has more than Alabama does, just in terms of conference victories. So it's got a great, great history and legacy in basketball. It's just overshadowed dramatically by what's happened in Big Blue Nation.
Sure.
Same way with hoops. Uh, you go to the Final Four in basketball, and it's an absolute celebration. We lose, in essence, in the Final Four in football, and people are disappointed. It's natural, but it's, I think, a logical comparison. It makes you understand why things are so much on the uptick. And I was with Nate the day after the Final Four loss to UConn, and we're all disappointed, but at the same time, you recognize the significance of doing something that had never before been done at Alabama. And I was careful how I phrased it and how I said it, but I said, man, just, I know you're down, I know you're disappointed, but can't congratulate you enough for what you've done. He inherited some great players and a program that was in a good spot and was ready to go to another level. But the reality is, the last game that was played by the University of Alabama before he became the head coach was a first-round NIT loss at home to Norfolk State.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to go from that to 5 years later, yes, a loss to UConn, but in the Final Four of the NCAA tournament, that's one heck of a turnaround. And it's not a one-year deal. Let's not forget, guys, he's won 2 SEC regular season and 2 tournament titles.
Right.
He's been to the NCAA tournament 4 consecutive years. This is very much a program on the rise that may possibly be the preseason #1 ranked team in America when the AP poll comes out here in a few months. So it's an exciting time, to say the very least.
Well, let me say this. Then we'll end basketball and we'll move on. It's not like UConn was some scrub team.
Right.
You lost to an
Yeah.
incredibly coached, unbelievably talented program. So that's
Yeah.
nothing to hold your head down.
I think a historically great team in the last 15 years.
Yeah.
As good as any in the last 15 years has been, and kind of the way it was when Mark Gottfried's team had the misfortune of drawing UConn in the Elite Eight
Mm.
several years ago. What was my second year at the time to do the play-by-play? So 20 years prior. If you play anybody other than UConn, you probably win.
No
And they don't give you awards for this, but being at the Final Four, I saw all 4 teams play, and that includes Purdue, which was a great, great team, and had beaten Alabama earlier in the year. But at the same time, there's no doubt in my mind that of the 4 teams that took the floor on semifinal Saturday in Phoenix, Arizona, Alabama was the second best team to hit the floor that day, and would have beaten Purdue or NC State. Unfortunately, their matchup was with the national champions and clearly the best team in the country last year.
So you've had the pleasure of calling an unbelievable amount of talented squads. I'm putting you on the spot a little bit. Yeah, Jeff and I are blessed to be able to do it at a high school level. It's called baseball, basketball, football. Football is always my favorite, but I have the most fun calling basketball, and baseball is by far the hardest, in my opinion. How is it on your level?
I love all 3. I really do. You get into the season, you draw. As you get later in each of the seasons, you feel even more of a connection with each of those teams. it truly is whatever season I'm in that I have the most fun. It seems they all are very, very different.
We there, Chris? You there? I think he dropped out.
Oh, we drop a call?
Chris, you there? He dropped out. Maybe he'll join us back in just a second. So you were talking about baseball, right? I mean,
Yeah.
moving towards baseball and the things that are going on with University of Alabama baseball. I was looking at just matter of fact, it was weird because I was just pulling baseball up and the run that they had this year. It looked like when they started out, it was going to be trash. But they just kind of pulled it together, right? You talk about that. I'm going to try to work on getting Chris back.
Well, I mean, there was a
You sent a resend the text, by the way, as you're doing it.
Okay.
Yep.
See, let me open this up so you can see.
He must be. Where's he traveling?
He's in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, that's what it is. Resend that thing. He'll jump on here in a minute.
The airdrop going.
There you go. You got it?
It's open.
Boom. Done. Talk about the baseball deal.
And they're incredible. They lost some kids. They had I think it was their best pitcher transferred to LSU this past year. I don't have it yet.
Nothing?
Mm-hmm. And incredible pitcher, man.
Chris, you there? Okay, keep talking. We'll figure it out.
So I'm very excited.
He's full of knowledge. Though.
Oh,
there you go, right there.
No, he's incredible. There he is.
Yep. Got it. Boom. You know he's traveling down there with that Verizon.
AT&T don't work on game day.
Suck of sales.
That's what I heard.
There we go.
Shoot that back over to me. Perfect. Well, I really want to talk about some football, right? Because that's really what everybody wants to know what's going on.
Sure.
Samuel Ray, appreciate you watching. Just get here when you can. Kevin O'Brien. Daniel Harper, thanks for the questions. And as soon as we get Chris back on, we'll pose some of these questions to him. And we're just now kind of eased into it a little bit, Jeff.
Sure.
And get to know him a little bit. And what a great dude, man. So gracious with his time, so knowledgeable. I'm very interested to see what he thinks about KDB, about Kalen DeBoer.
Yeah.
The shift since Coach Saban. If you look at the times that the era that Chris has been at Alabama, and he's seen championship after championship after championship after NFL player after NFL player after NFL player. Go ahead, Jeff. You good?
No, you're good. You talk.
Yeah, I was.
That's all you.
About nothing important. Hey, again, thank you to our sponsor, Fully Loaded. Always appreciate them being a huge part of this program. If you're interested in being a sponsor, hey, send me a message. We got you.
There he is. He's back.
We were just yelling, swim.
My apologies, guys. This is one of those deals where when you're doing it by phone and found out something pretty interesting there. If you do get a phone call in the middle of this, it will indeed cut you off. So I couldn't help it. I'm sorry.
No, we're going to get right into football. And Jeff has a question for you.
All right, Kevin Moore from iHeartRadio said, you know Kevin. Unfortunately,
I know Kevin, the best saxophone player around.
That's what Kevin told us.
He did tell us that. Yes, he did. We love Kevin Moore. He says, why is Kalen DeBoer, Hey Coach, show on Wednesday nights now? And is that on Learfield? Or is that a Learfield decision or what?
That is a Kalen DeBoer decision.
Okay.
That's what he's done for years with his shows, and it is his show, and so we're going to obviously accommodate that. Nights, I'll be honest, I love it because, well, road games on Thursday nights, road games for that weekend allows me to leave on a Thursday and get to where we're going a day earlier, and if there are some travel issues, it buys you a little grace and makes that a little bit easier. So I'm glad it's a Wednesday night radio show. Candidly,
Yeah, Kevin too. He said that way he can get out and go to a Thursday football game, high school game. So,
That's right.
which is great. Hey, so let's ask this question. A
that's
lot of people
right.
actually sent in this question over. And Jeff and I did a show like most everyone else in the dark days of Nick Saban retiring.
Right.
That's what we called it. And we were talking about possible replacements. Our two that we came up with, we thought would be the best was Dan Lanning and Kalen DeBoer.
Right.
And to this point, I think Kalen DeBoer has been incredible, and he has the kind of attitude that I don't think he's intimidated or overshadowed to be at a place like Alabama. What's been your experience?
Let me tell you, I've at least 50 times since, and I say this in jest but respectfully, since his coronation on the Saturday after Coach Saban announced on Wednesday that he was stepping aside, and then on Saturday we've got a new head coach at Alabama. And the press conference, whether it's him or whether it goes back to when Gene Stallings was hired, that's a coronation when you name the coach at Alabama.
Amen.
But having been around him there and then several times since, we've flown together to speaking engagements for him where we've done town hall type deals. And it has really been a lot of fun to get to know him. And I've said this from being around him. I've never seen a better combination of humility and self-confidence. He is not an arrogant individual at all. If he were sitting around a table at a barbecue restaurant with you, you would feel like you're talking to one of the guys. At the same time, he's not overwhelmed by the magnitude of the job of being the head coach at the University of Alabama. He certainly understands it, respects it, has great respect for Coach Saban, but he's not in awe of where he is to the level that he'd be overwhelmed by it.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important, that you have somebody that is comfortable in his own skin, that has built his own resume, that is wise enough to tell Nick Saban, you better believe I loved having you around and being able to pick your brain.
Sure.
But that only works if you've got an individual like Coach Saban who's willing to do so, and at the same time wants to be very careful and very respectful to not be looking as though he's standing over his shoulder and critiquing every move that he makes. He got himself out of that office as quickly as he possibly could to make sure they got ready for whoever was next. And while he's got an office in the South Zone at Bryant-Denny Stadium, he has made it known, I'm here for you in any way I can help, but it's your program, and I'm not going to get in your way, and I'm not going to try to overstep my bounds. I'm not going to act like this is still my program. I love it. I love Alabama, and I want to help you be successful, but I'm not going to get in your way. And I think that is so unique, so rare, and it's a reason why I would be very surprised if the level of success we're accustomed to at Alabama drops off at all. That doesn't mean we're going to win the national championship every year or even play for it. It didn't happen every year under Nick Saban. But when the season begins and you're listing the four that are in the conversation to play for it at the end of the year, I'll be quite surprised if Alabama's name is not right there. And I think you'll be making a mistake if you overlook Alabama in that regard.
Well, Jerry and I have been talking about that before Coach Saban steps aside. We were like, how's that going to work? Because we've seen that and on the high school level, we've seen it on the college level, where legacy guys just step aside, but then they don't step aside. But we've seen that with Coach Saban. It's been like, hey, Coach DeBoer, this is your show. I'm here to support in any capacity that you want. And but it also takes a guy that's secure in who he is to be able to step in like DeBoer
No
has
doubt.
and run with that. So talk about that if you don't mind.
No, I agree with you. I think, and I may be dead wrong in this regard. So if I am, and somebody that's a big Wisconsin fan that is listening says, "Yo, you got it all wrong," I'll gladly own that. But from the outside, I've always kind of gotten the feel that Barry Alvarez always wanted to have a hand in what was taking place with the
Mm-hmm.
football program at Wisconsin.
Yep.
And
100% correct.
we've also seen guys at different places, and I'm not speaking necessarily of Wisconsin, but guys step aside and they talk about how much they want to help. I'm a whoever man, and or whatever that school is, and I'm going to do everything I can to help. Well, then the next guy comes in and has a similar line of success pretty quickly. And it's almost like they get worried that somebody may forget them, and they kind of torpedo what's taking place because they care more about their legacy than they do about the program itself. And it can be a mess. And I could give you a couple examples, but I'm not going to.
It's classic.
You are classic.
I, I simply, I think that's where Coach Saban um, is very secure in who he is, what he's done, and truly has developed a and wants to help, but at the same time knows that the best thing he can do to help is to be available, but not always around.
Yeah.
And that's what I think that's what we've seen so far. I mean, look, I don't know how many times it's happened now, but I know this, our defensive coordinator inside of about 6 or 8 weeks had been in his office 3 times to pick his brain and watch film with him because he wanted to know why he did certain things and how he did certain things.
You talk about a
and
home run hire.
That to me says 2 things. It says, yeah, we want coaches' input, but also says I'm pretty smart. I know who the best in my era is, and he's right down the street. I'd be kind of foolish not to ask what he thinks.
Absolutely.
Well, one of my favorite quotes I've heard so far by Coach DeBoer is, "Hey, I understand I'm taking over for Coach Saban, but do I still get to keep Miss Terry?"
Yes, exactly. No doubt. No, I still go back to Coach Saban's introductory press conference in Tuscaloosa, and I was in the room and had a good friend that I worked with for years at Alabama. And you may recall that when Coach was introduced and there was a Q&A afterwards, he'd already introduced Terry and his daughter, and I can't remember if his son was there that day or not, but he introduced them. And during the Q&A, there were a few times where Terry interrupted Coach to remind him of a couple of things. And so the press conference ends, and you remember how impressive it was.
Yeah.
And I turned to my friend and coworker David Crane, and I said, "Well, there's a new sheriff in town."
Yeah.
And David very wisely said, "Yep, and her name is Terry."
That's awesome.
And that's exactly what it was. But what a phenomenal team they were. And I'm so glad. Coach told me on the day of A-Day, it was really funny. He's so meticulous about time, and everything was almost down to the second in terms of how it was timed out with his schedule. And we're doing the captain ceremony at Denny Chimes. Well, on the itinerary that I had, Coach Saban was going to arrive at 1:20. Now, in the past, that probably didn't mean that Coach was going to arrive at 1:19, and it dang sure didn't mean that Coach was going to arrive at 1:21. Well, at 1:17, he gets out of the car and is walking with Cedric and a state trooper towards me. And I'm in a slight panic because Kalen DeBoer and the three captains are nowhere to be seen at the time. And I thought, 3 minutes with him having to wait can be like 3 hours. And he's going to yell at me, and it ain't my fault, and he don't even work here anymore. What's the deal? So I'm standing there nervously waiting and watching after I'd spoken to him, obviously, and shaking his hand and asked how he was doing. I start turning and looking like, please, guys, hurry. And all of a sudden, he says, well, I normally have 6 things on a day. I've only got 3 today. And I said, first of all, I thought, holy cow, he's initiating a conversation. And then I said, well, what are you going to do? Just double up your speeches? He said, well, I would. He said, I would, but this is my last one. And kind of laughed. And then he said, but I tell you what, I'm going to do something today I've never done before. He said, I'm going to sit and watch a game with Miss Terry. I said, well, Coach, I've sat one booth away from her many times and have seen her during a game. You're in for a treat today, boy. And he laughed and he goes, wow. He goes, he said, coming in today, he goes, I've never seen it like this. He said, they got roads blocked and traffic everywhere. He goes, I've never seen so many people. And it took me back for a second. And after just a few seconds, it dawned on me. And I stepped up where nobody else could hear us. And I said, Coach, it's been like this every day since you set foot on campus. Yeah. You've just never noticed it before. And he looked at me with all seriousness and said, really? And I said, Coach, you've got such tunnel vision. You've never paid attention, but it's been like this every single time Alabama's been out here. Wow. And he goes, wow, I guess I never have. And to further that point, I mentioned that he's got an office in the South Zone. You both have been in Tuscaloosa.
Right, sure.
I'm gonna ask a little geographical question for you, okay?
Okay.
You walk out of the south end of the stadium, okay? Picture it now. You're walking out of the south end. You're facing the cemetery right there, okay?
Okay. Yeah.
To your right, there is a long-standing establishment that's a crowd favorite. What is it? Hamburger place. Sorry, I put you on the spot.
No. We were just down there when we called the high school championship game.
Yeah, Ramajamas.
Yes.
Long time place. So Coach is walking out of his office one day and asked somebody, "What's going on over there?"
No.
And the guy said, "Coach, what are you talking about?" He said, that little place over there. What is that? And the guy said, Coach, you mean Ramajamas? He goes, I don't know. What is it? 18 years now he's been coming to that stadium. Wow. 17 as the head coach. And he had never paid attention and noticed Ramajamas before.
That's incredible.
Kevin Moore screaming, Samuel Ray screaming, Ramajamas.
Yeah, no doubt. So it's just funny. That's how focused the man is, and it's why he is absolutely the best of this era
Yeah.
And I'll let others debate the Coach Bryant, Coach Saban deal. I'm not about to get in the middle of it, but it's
That's awesome.
easily over the last 40 years, he's been the best.
Hey, quickly for me now, and Jeff has a football question. We all want to know something about the season, but we had Andy on 2 weeks ago. This man absolutely loves you and appreciates your friendship more than I think possible.
Who is that now? I'm
Andy
sorry, I
Burke.
missed the
I'm sorry.
beginning of.
Yeah, Andy
Oh,
Burke.
yeah, Andy's a dear friend, has been for, good Lord, 25 years at least. And yeah, I think the world of him. He's a great man and a great friend. It's kind of tough. Here's the thing that makes it tough with the friendship, but I guess that shows what real friendship is. If my job is going great, then that means his job may not be going so well, and vice versa.
That's
That's
true.
fair. That's fair.
But
Well,
that doesn't change. That doesn't change how I feel about him.
he went in great detail about the photo that's on his desk
Yeah.
of the four of you,
Yeah,
which is pretty special to him.
no, and it is to me as well. That was a great time, and just devastating when we lost Rod the way we did. Uh, and having done so many games, uh, I started to say with, but I'm talking about one booth over from Rod and Andy, and knowing how close their friendship was. That Andy was literally the godfather of Rod's children. That it that's still a painful thing to think of, and an amazing thing that that Andy and Jan did what they did in terms of caring for those kids, and basically finishing the run of the son through high school, and getting him for the next stage of life as best they could in the midst of a horrible tragedy. And
Yeah.
again, I ain't talked football or broadcasting one bit, because when it comes to Andy and I, it really doesn't have. That may have been what provided the introduction
Sure.
to us, but he's been a friend and somebody who's been a counsel for me in personal matters for literally 25 years, and I love and respect him greatly.
Yeah, that was his sentiment as well. Now we're going to throw just a couple quick football questions at you, and because I know your time is limited, and we sure appreciate you taking time to be with us. Jeff and I were talking. Take the name out of the team, right? The team doesn't matter. If you're just looking at roster, I cannot name five better rosters than the University of Alabama.
Yeah, I don't
So
disagree with you.
with that being said, with go ahead, Jeff. Lost my headphone.
No, I was going to
With
say I
You know?
agree with you.
yeah, with that being said, I'm looking at Heisman. I love the early talk. Who's going to be it? With the offense that Coach DeBoer loves to implement, with the talent that's there, you cannot convince me that Milroe will not be in New York this year for the Heisman. I
Well,
think he's
look,
that kind of talent.
no, it certainly helps to be um, on one of the top rated teams in the country. It helps that you had some Heisman moments the previous year, and moments that certainly put you in the spotlight. Now, again, it's the amazing way that life can change so quickly. He went from being the guy who lost the starting job
Mhm.
to being one that a lot of people were ticked didn't get invited to the Heisman uh, ceremony by the end of the year, and almost led Alabama to a national championship. So it's crazy how it can change, which means it can go south again
Sure.
at any point. But he's going to be in a spot with uh, where Alabama's going to be ranked, the games they will play early, especially against Wisconsin and Georgia, and with already a bit of a resume himself on the national stage, that should he be able to get the Tide off to a quick start, it's going to have a chance to gain momentum and put himself where, he absolutely will be there with an opportunity to be in New York when that award is given out.
Yeah, and just so you know, this isn't a homer take. This isn't a biased take. I'm not an
Yeah,
Alabama guy. I'm not.
I understand.
I'm not an
I
Auburn guy.
understand.
Y'all do an Alabama and Auburn show, and I'm neither one. I'm a Notre Dame guy.
Sure.
I'm strictly football when it, and your roster is incredible, and I don't see it according to the rankings and recruiting I'm watching. Minus those couple, just those couple undecided kids. Long way till December. I don't see the ship sinking anytime soon.
No, I remind people of this all the time, and I apologize for the fact that my GPS system is telling me something I already know. I've had a couple of connection issues, but the truth is, and I've said this semi-joking, but I'm really not. Um, it took Les Miles 6 years, I think it was. I've forgotten how many. But I think it took Les Miles 6 years to screw up what he inherited from Nick Saban.
Mm.
And make no mistake, he absolutely screwed it up. But he had a lot of wins and a championship in that time. At least one national title. He had an opportunity to win some SEC titles in the midst of that, and did really well until he didn't. So to go, my point being is that Les Miles was a decent coach and won a national championship. Um, Coach Orgeron, with all due respect, is not a guy that anybody is clamoring to hire as a head coach, and nobody in America was, other than LSU, after he had been fired at Ole Miss. LSU's the only place he could have gotten a head coaching job at a major program, and he wasn't even the first three choices there. But he also caught lightning in a bottle and won a national championship. But Kalen DeBoer, and I have no problem saying this, is an infinitely better head coach than Ed Orgeron, and a infinitely better person. Everything that I know of Les Miles, Ed Orgeron, and a better coach than Miles.
Yeah.
So, and oh, by the way, the only time Alabama hasn't won at even a moderate level is when they had at least one, and probably, if we're being honest, two arms tied behind their back by the NCAA. I'm not saying national championships every year, but I'm talking, every football coach since Bear Bryant walked back on his alma mater's campus, every coach had at least one 10-win season. Every one of them. So when you look at the resume of Kalen DeBoer and the fact that this program was in the national championship semifinals last year, why would you not expect them to be in the conversation to start the year? And there's no guarantee you're going to be in the playoff this year. But if you're going to bet, boy, you'd be awfully foolish not to bet on the Tide to be there, not just this year, but in the years to come as well.
And you should have beat Michigan, but that's a different story. God, it gets me fired up. I hate Michigan.
A Notre Dame guy talking about Michigan.
Yeah, exactly right.
So go ahead.
I would say two things and I'm done. Hey, you got two fans here that are asking for shout-outs. Miss Diane Barley, and of course the one and only Brian Stanfield, both asking for shout-outs from the great legendary Chris Stewart, if you wouldn't mind. I hate going with Brian Stanfield's name.
Me too. I think we lost him again, but it's okay. He's driving. So anyway, Thank you, Chris Stewart, for everything. And just thank you for accommodating us. I mean, this guy, he's driving, he's working, he's doing the things for the University of Alabama. Thank you guys for joining us. We will talk to you next time. Thank you, Chris Stewart, the voice of the Alabama